What strategies, skills and techniques can we learn from the best Hyrox athletes in the game? Hey, what is happening, people? Woodsy Workout here, and today we are learning from the Elite 15 men and women who raced in the European Championships last weekend. I'm going to be breaking down how they did on each station, who did really well, how can they learn from each other, how can we learn from them, and everyone improve for your next Hyrox race. Now, before we get into it, I just want to kind of preface by saying that these are some of the top athletes in the world. So whatever they're doing, it's working to some degree. I'm going to be breaking things down mostly from a technical aspect on the stations and sharing my opinions as a coach and a Hyrox athlete. So it will include like critiquing form and approach, which is just one part of racing. As you will see from some of these guys, they will have what you might not consider or what you would consider imperfect form, but either it works for them or they are fit enough and fast enough that they can still have success with it. So with that being said, let's go. So first we have the ski. You see most of these guys with long, controlled strokes. They are straight up and down with the hips above the knee, no wasting energy with like a deep squat. The stroke rate isn't crazy. You'll probably see Tim here, like a shorter, lighter athlete with a bit of a quicker turnover to some of the bigger guys. But as it's their first station, you want to be relaxed. Taking your time with the recovery stroke, so you can see that no one's really panicking here, and they're all doing relatively the same kind of pace. They're in that sort of 140s pace per 500 meters. On the women's side, you will see a bit more variation, especially Viola here has that huge butterfly-like stroke where the arms come wide and folds all the way down to where her head is like well below the screen near her knees. Lauren does this a bit too. I'm not sure the reasoning behind it. I think it may be because they struggle to put power through the arms and the lats. From what I've researched, you benefit a little bit more from keeping that torso upright a bit more, finishing straighter with the arms, so finishing straight down with the arms, and that's going to allow you to get into your next stroke faster, because all you need to do is bring the arms up, extend the hips and squeeze the glutes, rather than like bringing your whole body up and folding it down in half like every rep. Okay, so on to the sleds, and firstly on the men's side, this was really a cool moment. Like, you had 5 of them enter the sleds at the same time, and then you see all the separation in kind of slow-mo, and you see multiple techniques being used. Michael Sandbach was the fastest on this station, 2 minutes and 6 seconds, with Alex Ronkovic just a second behind, and they've kind of got 2 different techniques, so both of which are very fast. Michael goes for the body behind the bars, so fists up next to his shoulders, and Alex goes for the shoulders through the bars, gripping the bars with his forearms. Sandbach is probably one of the biggest guys in the field. The method he uses, in my opinion, kind of requires more bracing through the upper body. It's sort of similar to if like you ever held kettlebells in the front rack position. Your upper lats and chest is locked in, and he obviously has the strength for it, and it allows for a more open hip angle, which can allow you to go faster. But at these kind of weights, you're not really necessarily looking for the fastest method, but the method that is going to allow you to break less. The other technique that Alex is demonstrating, I think, requires less bracing. Here you shift a lot of your body weight over the sled, almost like you're sort of driving your shoulders forward and like dragging the sled from the crux of your elbows. And I think it taps into the biceps a little bit, but it requires less bracing of the upper body. And it's almost, if we make a comparison, if the shoulder stance is like holding the kettlebells up by your forearms, up by your shoulders, then this method is like holding like a sandbag around your waist. So yeah, less involvement of like the shoulders and chest. The final technique you see, and it's one that I tend to steer people away from, is this arms extended. You see Florian Gast doing it as he comes in here. This is, to me, I think it's like overhead squats instead of front squats. It's possible you can still move a lot of weight with that method, but anytime you're reaching out in front of you or above you, you're increasing the amount of body parts that need to contract and stabilize. So, but what is interesting is you see Florian, he uses this for a little bit, and then he changes up and he mixes the stances. So first he went shoulders, fists to his shoulders, then he had his arms outstretched, and then on the way back he had his shoulders through. And this could be a method to manage fatigue or build up of fatigue in certain muscle groups. So for example, like the arms outstretched may not allow you to push as hard, but it can open up your lungs and allow you to breathe more. So yeah, I mean, you can see this sometimes in other stations. People, athletes shift their technique a little to give themselves some reprieve, and it's one that I think we see here. So Florian's sled push was about 30 seconds slower than the leaders, and he isn't as big as Alex or Michael, so it is to be expected, but I would still question that technique. The other thing to note as we continue is with these first few stations, being the fastest might not necessarily be a good thing. If you're a smart racer, you may be able to beat someone at this point, but you just hold back and you are preserving energy for later. For example, we saw David Magida was fourth fastest on the sled push and came out in the front of the pack, but dropped to 8th by the end of the race. And Tom Hogan do the opposite. He was 8th fastest on the sled push and came out in 8th, and then progressed to 5th by the end. So yeah, definitely something to note. The rope pull. With the rope pull, you see a lot less deviation in technique. Everyone tends to go for the walk back method, especially at the pro weights. You grab it, open the hips, lean back, walking back, and then the differences we see is if you watch Alex, he manages the rope very well to the side, whereas Sandy, like, he straddles the rope and pays less attention to it, which ends up shortening the box that he can step back into. And then one point of contention maybe is Alex is in the outside lane, and that allows him to get his rope really clear out off to the side, whereas Tim, who's in one of the middle lanes, can't do that without obstructing the other lane and getting a potential penalty. So just interesting your thoughts on this. Do you think that's fair, as he came in first, so he kind of gets that priority, or do you think you should be penalised if you're chucking it out to the side? Okay, onto the burpee broad jump. And this is where I think the cracks really start to show. People are definitely fatigued at this point and starting to realize either they can hold the pace or they're going to have to slow down. And you see nearly all the guys doing the step method. This is a method that I adopted early and encouraged for people that struggled to keep their heart rate down. So it's interesting to see that this has now become the most common technique. The burpee broad jump standards have been brought up as an area that's had mixed judging. So I think now they are really focusing on making sure the standards are upheld, and particularly the hand placement near the feet. And stepping forward into the jump. You can actually see a couple of Tim's reps push the boundaries, and I think he did get a warning for it. If you see that back leg coming through and stepping in front before taking off. So just be careful if you are using that step technique. I do encourage it, but you need to be careful not to place that back leg in front of your already planted leg. And then a different form we're seeing here from Megiddo, who does this, he goes to his knees before stepping up and then jumping. Definitely slower. I don't know whether it's just, I don't know whether he's struggling here. I mean, I have seen him do it on other races, so I'm sure he has kind of some reasoning behind it, maybe trying to preserve energy, but either way, 20 seconds behind the leader, so not the fastest method. Onto the row. Now, rowing there's been a bit of talk in the Hyrox community on whether you should use a traditional pure rowing technique, like the gold standard form of Olympic rowing, or whether this changes because you're rowing for Hyrox, where you're compromised by stations before and after. And there's been some arguments for using more pulling from the back than the legs to save them for the other leg dominant stations. And I kind of understand this, but I think it's not so black and white, and I think there's a lot of sort of nuances. I think you'll get the best answer from really good rowers that then try a Hyrox, and my guess would be they wouldn't modify their technique too much. But let me know your thoughts. If there's any rowers that have done a Hyrox, not just rowing, then let me know in the comments what are your thoughts. But anyway, if we look at Michael and Alex, their catch position, so that's the front of the stroke, they're very balled up, their back's rounded, and that puts a lot of force through a very concentrated area of the back and doesn't distribute the force across all the muscles. The rounded back that you see in most of these guys could be a result of tight hamstrings or their position on the seat tipping the hips back. Sometimes your hip flexors can get real pumped up from running and everything else that it kind of stops the hips moving freely and makes it difficult to tilt forward from the hips rather than arching the back forward. The women, I think, have a bit of a better technique, likely more flexible, but because they've got straighter backs, it's difficult to see. But Michaela Norman in the third lane, I think she's got the best technique and actually did have the fastest row time. Lauren Weeks comes, I think, a little too far forward with her bum, so that she's like in this deep squat, and rowers, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a stronger position would be with the hips back a bit and the shoulders in front of the hips. Not a lot to comment on with the farmers. At this point in the race, you can see the gap starting to really increase especially on the men's side. The top 4 fastest farmer carries, all under 2 minutes, and they are the top 4 that won overall. So you can see they're actually extending their lead at this point. It shows that having energy and pace this deep into the race is really indicative of good performance. And if you're starting to slow down at this point, you probably have come out too fast. The women's side is a little different. I think because Lauren Weeks she developed such a dominant lead that at this point she can kind of stay within herself and cruise through the farmer carries. So a very opposite strategy than what we see most of the time. For the lunges, again, there's not too much variance in technique. It's more to do with how fatigued you are at this point and how strong you are at that movement. How strong and stable your legs and core are. On the women's side, you see Meg Jacoby and Miriam Von Rowe just methodically moving through every rep, looks the same. On the men's side, you see Michael lose the lead to Alex, and his last few lengths of the lunges look a little different to the first. He's starting to lean to the side a little, the hips are shifting, there's a little bit of not shakiness, but compensation a little bit with the movement, where Alex looks really stable, even with these huge strides that he's got. It obviously shows he's got that real solid core. And finally, we've got the warbles, and there's a lot here. We saw some really impressive times from both the men's and the women's, and the girls are starting to go unbroken. It's becoming a thing. So we see with these huge sets, it's becoming a question of not just like how many reps can you do per set, but how quickly can you cycle these reps? How efficient can you be? And in terms of form, we can look at like good squat mechanics, and we can make some comparisons to some of the top CrossFit athletes that have spent longer kind of perfecting this skill. And what you see is what we're kind of looking for is that straight back, the ball underneath the chin, and the hands and the elbows underneath the ball. You can see here the bottom squat position, torso really vertical, hands low down on the ball. As she comes up, she explosively pops the hips to full extension, which propels the force upwards into the ball. And a common mistake would be not opening the hips all the way, and then it requires a lot more work from the shoulders. One method you can use if you feel your shoulders are blowing up is what's called a clearing stroke, and you can see Miriam use it here with in the second lane on the right. See how her arms are coming around and back rather than Meg, who's going straight up and down with her hands. That's to try and provide a bit of reprieve on the shoulders. It takes some practice, and it might not be something to use all of the time, but it can be like a useful tool to have. Lauren Weeks has a really nice squat. She's got a very slight torso lean, but straight back, ball in close to her body. Whereas if you go back to Michael, and I don't mean to pick on him because I know he struggles with these wall balls, but partly it's because he's a taller athlete, and with long femurs it makes squatting upright difficult. But you can see here he's rounded back, the ankle's starting to kind of cave in a little bit in order to get that depth. So again, mobility through the thoracic and the hips would go a long way here. As a final comparison, you can see Michaela Norman. Now, she's got longer legs too, but she does a really good job of maintaining a neutral spine, and she takes a slightly wider base and keeps that ball in tight so that it's in line with her line of drive. So she's actually providing optimal power and squatting just to the required depth. So that's all my thoughts on the technical aspect of the elites at the European Championships. As I said before, those are my opinions, just looking at the techniques. There's so much more that goes into racing, your strategy, your execution, your fitness, as well as your technique, which combine to make the best racers. And I think as the sport evolves and as we see these athletes continue to work on their skills in combination with how crazy fit and dedicated they are, we are going to see those times continue to drop. So I'm really, really excited and looking forward to seeing North American Championships and World Championships. Let me know your thoughts on this. If this is something you want to see more of, if you're like, whoa, Woodsy, what are you doing? These guys are way faster than you. Leave them to their game. I totally appreciate that. Yeah, let me know your thoughts if you found this helpful, if you found this useful. And I will be back with more content. And if you are at Manchester this weekend, then come and say hello. I will be judging and I will be around in the morning, so come and say hey. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video. Remember, follow me on Instagram at Woodsy Workout, subscribe, and see you in the next one.